Hey everyone. Thank you for joining us today on CRAAPy Conversations. Today I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Heidi Buchanan. And today's episode is brought to us by the letter C for currency. So Heidi, what can you tell us about currency and how it relates to kind of assessing sources of information?
Well, currency is just basically making sure that the date that the information that you're using was produced is relevant to the information that you need.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the time you're going to want up-to-date information, but not always.
So when would be a time where you wouldn't need necessarily up-to-date information? Because I always think like, hey, you want something that's like right there, right now. The newer is better. When would you not want something newer?
There's a couple examples. One would be historical research.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing research on the 1964 Civil Rights Act, for instance, you're going to want some information from 1964. That is the currency or the timeliness of that information. And those would be primary sources. So that's giving you a snapshot of the time. So you would want the legislation from that year. You want some newspaper articles, maybe some interviews, some information about people who were affected by that act. And then you're going to also want more current information. You're going to want the scholarly information that gives you the big picture of the Civil Rights Act. Scholarship itself is an ongoing conversation about a topic, and sometimes that conversation has been going on for a long time. For instance, if you're studying a medieval text, they've been talking about that medieval text for a long time. So sometimes you will find that the seminal article, for instance, on Beowulf, might be from the 70s or the 50s. But if you're not sure, then you can always look at more recent information, and they will cite those important sources, because part of that scholarly conversation is that they acknowledge what's come before them as well.
Right. So in a field like that, you would want to see where the information kind of originated from, because that's still relevant, because Beowulf hasn't really changed much since it was, written. I mean, I guess there's been new translations and things like that, but yeah. So you'd want to see where those ideas came from and then see how people built up those ideas, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Mm-hmm. But what about, so we're talking about, like, I guess, like the Civil Rights Act. Obviously there's a lot going on right now in regards to civil rights. If you were looking for information on civil rights and you were talking about something more from a modern perspective, you'd want more than just stuff from the 60s, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, you're going to want very current information. So because the scholarly academic process takes time, and people are discovering this with COVID too, the information that you had yesterday is not necessarily the same as the information that you have today.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's always good when you're researching a current event to really read today's news, find, reliable sources, find corroborating sources. And by that, I mean sources that agree with each other or are using the same kinds of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And referring to the same factual information. If they refer to, statistics from the CDC, go to the CDC and look at their statistics, look at the whole table, read all of the information. But yeah, make sure that you're reading the CDC information from, this week, rather than 3 weeks ago. And the same thing for the civil rights movement that's been going on. You want to make sure that you have a good sense of what's going on right now.
Right, because I mean, these are current events that are constantly evolving every day. I'm sure we're filming this, what is it? It's the 7th of August. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of new things whenever you guys are watching this weeks or months from now, that things have changed so much. So think back to like where you were today, I guess, and try to think about like how things have changed. Yeah. So what fields would you...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
That information is usually in newspapers. It hasn't made it to scholarly journals yet.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, that's actually a really good point. So, I guess like currency is a little different when it comes to when we're talking about newspapers versus like scholarly information. How would you say that differs a little bit?
It has to do with sort of the information process and the creation process. A journalist is a reporter, and they're reporting on the facts, and they're responsible for checking those facts before it gets published. But basically, they're writing the article, it's going to their editor, and then it gets published. So it's a very quick process. For scholarly materials, you've got someone doing an original study, which takes time, which we're seeing now with various vaccines and things like that. That has to be written up. There has to be a literature review, again, referring to that scholarly conversation. They have to show that they've done their research. Then they submit it to a journal, which goes out to other reviewers for a peer review process. And then it could get published. So it just takes a lot of time. All those hoops are very important for scholarly information because everyone is sort of a check for quality. But it also means that if you want a lot of scholarship on things that are happening right now, you're not going to find it.
No. I mean, I don't want to date this by just thinking of current events, but I guess, there was all sorts of things. I mean, the coronavirus thing is like a really kind of interesting one because we are seeing things develop in real time, and we could see, a month out, all of a sudden they were, I remember, back in April, you started seeing all this evidence popping up, and it was still all pre-published stuff too, because they could, it was all pre-peer reviewed research because it hadn't had the full time yet to even get that far. And that was still even, I was surprised how lightning speed that all came out.
Exactly. And so what you're going to get at the beginning are people like reporters who are talking to these experts who may be working on these studies that will get published in a journal. But right now, all we have are sort of the information from the experts when they get interviewed by various people, or when they share their information with each other in the scientific community. Through blogs or news reports, you'll see letters in scholarly journals, but the full report, the sort of what happened, will come later.
Right. And do you have any tips and tricks for the folks at home to kind of figure out if they need something super up to date or if something a little older will do? Do you have any advice for that?
What I usually do is I start with an encyclopedia article, and Wikipedia is actually fine for this.
Oh, I love Wikipedia.
Or a current book or a current article, the most current that you can find, and look at their bibliography and see, are they citing sources from a long span of time? Are they citing sources that are very recent? You can get a good idea of sort of what the topic and discipline, how that relates to the information and the timeliness of the information. So for instance, going back to the Beowulf thing, you'll see that conversation going way back over a century. But if you're searching something, maybe a healthcare topic, you'll see things that are cited much more recently. So that'll give you a clue. But you can also talk to your professor and see, okay, in your discipline, what does up to date mean? Because in every discipline, it might mean 10 years, 20 years. It might vary by topic. So you just want to kind of talk to somebody who's an expert in the discipline if you're not sure.
No, yeah, that's a really good point. I would absolutely recommend talking to your professors because they are the experts and they're probably knee deep in all this research and would definitely be a good source to talk about that with. Well, so I think that's pretty much at the end here. Is there anything else you'd like to add about currency? Anything that you think everyone should keep in mind, or anything you want to add?
I think the only thing that I didn't mention is that when you're looking online, even if a website is presenting older information, older articles or archives, the website itself needs to be updated regularly, and it needs to have been updated recently because that's a sign of quality and maintenance. So even if you're looking at the Library of Congress, you're looking at an old letter from the Civil War, you want to make sure that website is up to date, so that that you're getting the best information that they've got.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So everyone, all right, so try to get new information when you think you need it. Check to see if you need newer information. Always go back if you can to see when information came from, to use older sources. And if you're going from a historical perspective, of course, it's good to use older sources that kind of fit that time period. So, all right. Thanks, guys, for joining us on CRAAPy Conversations. Our next episode is going to be brought to us by the letter R, and we're going to be talking about relevancy. So hope you guys can. Oh, it's a great one. So, all right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.